Have you ever wondered what happens when curiosity goes too far? When obsession leads you down a digital rabbit hole you can't crawl back out of? Tonight, on Scary Moo, I'm going to share with you the most terrifying story I've ever experienced. One that began with a single click and ended in a chilling encounter with something that should never have been summoned. You're about to hear how we found a cursed ritual on the dark web, performed it in the dead of night, and unleashed an entity that refused to let us go. This isn't a legend, a creepypasta, or an urban myth. This is what really happened when we summoned a cursed entity from the dark web, and it found us. It all started with a dare. You know how it is among horror fans, someone always wants to push things further. My friend Marcus had been reading stories about a cult ritual circulating on the deepest layers of the internet. Not those obvious, cheesy scams, but the ones whispered about in hidden forums, shared by people who sounded genuinely afraid. Late one night, Marcus messaged me with a link. "You have to see this," he wrote. "They say nobody's completed this ritual and survived the night." I should have ignored it. I should have closed my laptop and gone to bed. But the darkness outside, the flickering candlelight in my room, and the promise of something truly forbidden was too much to resist. The website was crude, black background, blood-red text, and a warning at the top. Do not proceed if you value your soul. The page described a summoning ritual called the Black Wire. The instructions were precise, almost surgical in their detail. You needed 3 items. A mirror older than 10 years, a length of wire stripped from a device that had stopped working mysteriously, and a lock of your own hair. The ritual had to be performed between 2:33 and 3:03 a.m., with all lights off. And the most important rule: never, under any circumstances, break the wire's circle around the mirror once the entity appears. We laughed it off, at first. How many times had we heard about these so-called cursed rituals? But something about the specificity unnerved me. Why a mirror that old? Why wire from a broken device? Why such a narrow window of time? Marcus was already rummaging through his apartment for the items. I tried to sound skeptical, but inside, I felt the cold prickle of dread that only horror lovers understand, the sense that, just maybe, this time would be different. We agreed to meet at Marcus's place the following night. He lived alone on the edge of town, in a crumbling Victorian house that practically begged for something supernatural to happen. The kind of place with creaking floors, faded wallpaper, and windows that groaned in the wind. As midnight approached, we gathered the items. Marcus had found an old mirror in the attic, clouded with age. Wire from a broken radio that had died, mid-broadcast, without explanation, and we each snipped a lock of hair. I remember my hands shaking as I tied the wire into a perfect circle around the mirror. I told myself it was just nerves, after all, nothing was going to happen. At 2:33 we began. The instructions said to sit in silence, facing the mirror, and repeat a phrase in Latin that neither of us could pronounce correctly. Tenebris, veni. Ostend mihi veritatem. Darkness, come, show me the truth. We repeated it, over and over, our voices barely above a whisper. At first, nothing happened. The candle on the table flickered, the shadows swayed, and I felt foolish for even trying. Then the temperature dropped. Not a gradual chill, but a sudden, suffocating cold that pressed against my skin like icy hands. The shadows seemed to thicken, pooling around the wire circle, as if something was gathering just out of sight. Marcus was staring into the mirror, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Do you see that?" he whispered. At first, I thought he was joking. But then I looked. The reflection was wrong. Our faces were there, but behind us, the room was darker than it should have been. In the mirror, a figure stood in the corner, a tall, thin silhouette, its features blurred and shifting, as if it was made of smoke. Its eyes glowed like dying embers, burning straight through the glass and into my soul. My first instinct was to run. But I remembered the warning: never break the wire's circle. I gripped the table, my knuckles white, as the figure in the mirror began to move. It drifted closer, its limbs bending at impossible angles, its mouth stretching into a grin that split its face from ear to ear. I felt something cold brush against my neck, and Marcus gasped. "Don't look away," he hissed. "It's moving." The entity reached the edge of the mirror, its hands pressing against the glass from the inside. The surface rippled, as if it was trying to push through. I could hear its voice, soft at first, then rising to a bone-chilling whisper. "Let me in. Let me in." The wire trembled, vibrating with energy. The candle flickered and died, plunging us into total darkness. The only light was the faint, hellish glow from the mirror. We sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to speak. The figure pressed harder, its face inches from ours, its breath fogging the glass. I could smell it, a stench of rotting earth and burnt metal. I tried to steady my breathing, but it felt like the air had turned to ice. Marcus was shaking, tears streaming down his face. "We have to end it," he whispered. "We have to finish the ritual." The instructions said to break the circle only after the entity faded, never before. But it wasn't fading. It was getting stronger, more real, its whispers turning into guttural growls. "Let me in. Break the circle." I could feel its hunger, a bottomless void desperate to escape into our world. Then, the mirror began to crack. Tiny fissures snaked across the surface, spider webbing out from the entity's hands. The wire buzzed, sparks flying as it strained against some invisible force. I remembered a line from the instructions, a warning buried in the fine print. If the mirror breaks, the barrier is lost. You will be marked. I reached for Marcus, trying to pull him back, but he was transfixed, staring into the entity's eyes. "Don't listen to it," I begged. "Don't break the circle." But it was too late. The mirror shattered with a sound like a scream, shards raining onto the table. The wire snapped, recoiling like a serpent. And in that moment, the room went silent. The entity was gone, or so we thought. For a few seconds, we sat in stunned silence, our hearts pounding. Then, slowly, the temperature returned to normal. The shadows receded. The oppressive weight lifted from my chest. I looked at Marcus. He was pale, his eyes wide with terror, but alive. We both laughed, nervous, shaky laughter, the kind that comes after a nightmare. We told ourselves it was over. Just a trick of the mind, a hallucination brought on by fear and suggestion. But as we stood to leave, I noticed something on my arm. A thin, black mark, like a burn, winding around my wrist exactly where the wire had been. Marcus had one too, circling his ankle. We tried to wash them off, but the marks only grew darker, seeping beneath the skin like poisoned veins. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the entity's face, grinning at me from the darkness. I heard its whisper, let me in, echoing through my mind. The next morning, Marcus called me in a panic. "It's not over," he said. "Something's wrong." He described waking up to find all his mirrors cracked, the glass warped and blackened. His phone glitched, the screen flickering with static images of the entity's face. Even his dreams were infected, endless corridors of shadow, the entity lurking just out of reach. We tried everything, cleansing rituals, burning sage, even smashing every reflective surface in our homes. But the entity was always there, waiting. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of it in a window, its eyes blazing. Sometimes I'd hear its laughter, low and guttural, in the static between songs on the radio. The marks on our bodies spread, twisting into patterns I couldn't recognize, ancient, alien symbols that seemed to pulse with their own sick light. Days passed, then weeks. We grew paranoid, afraid to leave our homes, afraid to be alone, afraid of the dark. Lights would flicker and die whenever we entered a room. Electronics shorted out, screens flashing with glimpses of that hellish grin. Friends stopped visiting, claiming they felt uneasy, watched. It was as if the entity had burrowed into our lives, feeding on our fear, growing stronger each day. One night, Marcus vanished. I called and called, but he never answered. When I finally forced my way into his house, I found it empty, except for the mirrors. Every surface was covered with cracked glass, arranged in a circle around the center of the room. In the middle, a patch of darkness lingered, colder than ice, silent and still. On the wall, scrawled in black, were the words, "It found me." I ran as far and as fast as I could, but the entity followed. It's with me, even now, watching from the shadows. Sometimes I see it in the corners of my eyes, waiting for me to slip, to break, to let it in. The marks on my skin burn whenever I'm near a mirror. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I wake up screaming, the entity's face inches from mine, its whisper burrowing into my brain. This is my warning to you. Do not search for rituals on the dark web. Do not perform them, no matter how curious, how desperate, how brave you think you are. The things lurking in the digital shadows are not myths. They are real, ancient, and hungry. They feed on your fear, your doubts, your need to know what lies beyond the veil. I know you're watching this because you love horror. You crave that rush, that chill down your spine, the thrill of the unknown. But some doors should never be opened. Some rituals should never be performed. And some entities, once summoned, will never let you go. If you hear a whisper in the dark, or see a shape in the mirror that shouldn't be there, remember my story. Remember Marcus. Remember the price of curiosity. And above all, never, ever break the circle. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want more true tales of terror, subscribe to Scary Moo. Leave a comment if you've ever encountered something you can't explain, and share this video to warn others. Until next time, keep your lights on, your mirrors covered, and your curiosity in check. Some things are better left unseen. Good night, and don't look behind you.